Hey guys. So last video I kind of talked about the foundation for my faith life, and I alluded to the fact that there were so many awesome experiences that kind of helped develop my faith to where I am now. And I would be so remiss if I didn't say that a particular trip to a country set it all in motion. So I'm going to tell you guys about that. So what's really funny about this whole thing is that looking back on it, I never could have imagined doing what I'm doing right now because I was genuinely the most socially awkward kid I probably could ever dream up in my mind today. I was absolutely petrified to go have a conversation with somebody that I didn't know. And today, I don't think twice about doing it because I've changed so much through Jesus that I'm not generally not afraid of things anymore. I remember my first uh, night after mass. We have like a social night after um, mass every weekend, and I remember my first night. I walked downstairs and I met our youth minister, who's genuinely like one of the kindest people I've ever met in my life. I remember my mom kind of like literally pitched it to her as if I had some kind of like social anxiety disorder, because she told me like years later she was literally like scared to introduce me to these people because she didn't know how I was gonna go. But I remember I got down there and I was literally just standing there. And if you guys were anything or are anything like me, you know how weird that feeling is. Just literally just standing there. I had food in my hand, not knowing anybody there, literally just watching. Thankfully, I was introduced to a couple people, and I knew a couple people from sports in years past, and I was able to like reconnect with them. But anyways, about 3 or so months after that, I was asked to go on a mission trip. And for those of you guys don't know, it's kind of like a service trip, except it's much more centered on like sharing the love of Christ, instead of just like the service connotation. Um, I was asked to go on a mission trip to Haiti with our parish. And again, I was so scared because I literally knew nobody on the trip. Maybe I had a conversation with them in those first couple of months that I was part of the church, but I did not know anybody except for the priest who's on the trip and the youth minister. So going on that trip, I was so scared. I cannot even describe to you how scared I was. And to add on to all this, like we weren't allowed to bring our phones. So in the airport, I was literally walking around, like feeling around in my pocket, trying to like find my phone because I was so used to it. So when we got to Haiti, we took this long bus ride, basically inside of this big cage, to the orphanage, and it was on dirt roads, like possibly the worst driving conditions you can imagine. But when we got to the gates of the orphanage, I remember getting off the bus and immediately like one of these little kids just came up and like grabbed my leg and started hitting me. And I saw like the joy on their faces, and I saw um, them go up and remember the kids from my town, their names, or their names for kids who had gone before. I remember them going up to those kids, who were from my town, who had gone before, and like saying their names and playing with them. And it was kind of at that moment that I knew everything on this trip was going to be okay, and I didn't really need to worry. Um, but from there, everything multiplied by thousands and thousands, because what actually happened on the trip was so amazing. So within the first day or so of the trip, we visited this man named John Simone. And John Simone was a gang member in Haiti who had killed multiple people but had gotten in an extremely bad motorcycle accident. So he was paralyzed from essentially his neck down. There were small movements he could have, but he was basically paralyzed from the neck down. And before any of the mission trips, he was a mess. Like, he didn't want to talk to anybody. He refused to smile, would spit out food if people tried to feed him. But I remember hearing stories as time went on, he became more and more open. And I remember within the first 2 times we went and visited him, he was smiling like you wouldn't believe. And I really had to think within myself, like, what could make a man bedridden, paralyzed, in a hot, small shack this happy? And as time went on, I started to realize that it was the Eucharist, it was Jesus that was making him feel this way, because every single time we'd go, we would give him communion. And for those of you guys who don't know, the Eucharist is the body of Jesus Christ, and it's a common practice to give the Eucharist and have a small kind of like celebration with somebody who is bedridden like that. And every time we would give him the Eucharist, he would smile. And I remember one night, about half of us went, the other half stayed back. Half of us went and we gave him the Eucharist. And I was standing right next to his head when this was happening. We all kind of like surrounded his bed. I'll put a picture so you guys know what it's like. We all were surrounding his bed, and our priest gave him the Eucharist, and he smiled like you wouldn't believe. And to me, that was probably one of the more impactful experiences I've had as a Catholic, because it was the first time I saw how happy Jesus could make someone. So after meeting John Simone, I didn't really think my faith could get any deeper than it did and have another one of those spiritual highs that I did. But then I met this little girl named Mishka, who has epilepsy and would often get small seizures as a result of it. And what was very common for her was having a seizure and not being able to control herself afterwards. And there were multiple times where she literally had a seizure and fell into a fire. And when we got there, that had just happened. So she had burns all along her arms, on her legs, and even like part on her shoulders. And again, seeing a person who is in such a seemingly awful, awful place be so happy, it really made me question again, like, how could somebody be that happy if they were in such an awful position? Because whenever we saw her, she would have a bright smile on her face. So you guys can see what she looks like. She always was smiling, always wanted to talk to us. It was one of our favorite things was when we gave her little lollipops. And I remember one morning towards the end of the trip, a couple of my friends and I woke up a little bit earlier to go say goodbye. And we were planning on going for like 15 minutes, kind of just to check in, but we wound up staying there for much longer. And it just went to show how present Jesus was in her heart. Because, like I said, she was always smiling, always happy, and was probably in some of the most excruciating pain I could ever imagine and would never wish upon anybody. So one more thing on this trip that really cemented all the impact that it had on me and made me really feel God's presence was when we went up on this mountain. And the goal of us going on this mountain was to set up this big tent so we could have some sort of outdoor prayer service the next day. Because it was a custom, I think it was like the first Sunday of every month maybe, that they did that on that mountain, but they never really had the facilities to set it up. So we went and set up this big tent, and it was pouring rain, extremely windy. And I remember trying to put up like one of the bearings for the tent, and this little Haitian boy came over to me, tattered clothes, no shoes, dirty from head to toe, and grabbed the bearing next to me and started to help me. And I was blown away. Like, I remember like thinking about this. I had no idea he was helping me until I looked over, because he honestly wasn't really doing much. He was a little kid, he couldn't. But I started to do my best, at least, to talk to this kid, and I learned that his name was Max. And I know personally I'm not a person who really looks for signs from God, but right at that moment, I knew how present God was on that trip. I remember the day after, just thinking about that moment, it really brought me to tears, because coming into this trip, being so scared, more scared than I ever was in my life, and coming out completely rejuvenated in my faith and confident, and having a group of friends to talk about the faith with was instrumental in my faith development from there. And honestly, from this trip, everything else kind of followed. I was able to go back to Haiti 6 months later, and I had another amazing experience. And I was able to take that role of being the leader on the trip, because I had been there before. I was with a couple other people on that trip in February. I had been there before. So I was able to take more of a leadership role in helping others be more and more comfortable in that country as well. And being who I am now and trying to be the best leader I can be every day, I think I did a good job. I'm not perfect, but looking back on it, that was really the first time that I was a leader. And again, everything else fell into place after that. Thank you guys for watching. I'm going to do another part of this because there's really so much to talk about. And this is really only half of my high school faith, and the other half is where I've learned a lot of the lessons that I bring into my life now. So I'll be uploading that soon. Thank you guys for watching. If you can, like the video and subscribe to this channel for more, and God bless you all.